According to my clock, it is now at the top of the hour. It is 1 p.m. Eastern time. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you everybody for being here, for joining us for our digital seminar today on internal auditing for SQF Excellence. So again, thank you so much for being here. At this point, I'm going to let Brian introduce himself. So Brian, Neal, go ahead and tell everyone who you are, a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So as Elizabeth said, my name is Brian Neal. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. First off, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy days as we all have plenty of those going on. I am the technical manager for Eurofins Food Assurance over the certification business. I've been in the food industry for around 22 years. It's crazy to say that, but 22 years. 12 of those years working for a certification body. Um, be 7 years in September with Eurofins. So I've been doing that for quite a while. And that's both as an auditor, a food safety auditor, and also the technical manager. So managing the audit schemes and things like that. Elizabeth, if you want to tell a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Brian. So I'm currently working at SQFI. I am the technical specialist in the compliance department. I've been here about 2.5 years, I guess maybe a little bit over 2.5 years. But I've been in the food industry for 12 years. So I've worked at different SQF certified sites. So I have listed there the different FSCs that I've worked in. So 10, 11, 13, and 16. For those of you who don't know the numbers, I've worked in dairy, honey processing, bakery, and beverage. So a little bit of experience across the board. I've been in probably a lot of your shoes as that SQF practitioner, so hopefully can provide insight from that point of view.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so let's get into what we're talking about today. So, as the initial slide said, internal auditing. But here's some things that we're going to cover as we kind of go through. You can see that I've put them all question marks because it's all question marks, and we're going to hopefully answer some of those questions. So first, what is an internal audit? It could be many things to many different people. So, what you need to do to make sure it's effective. What tools do we need? Who should be involved? How is it conducted? What do we do after the audit? So we have the audit now, what do we do kind of thing? And then just a little bit about continuous improvement. All right, first off, let's get into the definition of an internal audit. So an internal audit within the context of SQF is a systematic, independent, and documented process for obtaining evidence to review and evaluate a site's food safety management system against the requirement of SQF. And of course, if you have the quality code, you also have a quality management system. So just the SQF system. So that's a lot of words. Elizabeth, I guess to you, what does it mean, internal audit for, guess like talk about it a little bit.
All right. Yeah, so we talk about internal auditing, and people often mix those up between an audit and an inspection. So they'll be like, oh, I went and did my audit today, and that was went out into the production floor and they inspected what happened. And while that is in part of what an internal audit, it's not the internal audit. So the internal audit is looking at everything, your entire system. So looking at those policies and procedures, all your records, all of those programs that make up your food safety system or quality, but everything that's involved. It's not just going out to the floor and observing and doing an inspection.
Yeah, that's a good point. And as an auditor, we still see that where some sites they do their facility inspection, say, oh, here's my internal audit. Well, what about these other things? And what are the other things, by the way? So let's talk about what those other things are that you kind of need to have an effective internal audit system, which includes the inspection of the facility. So first off, internal auditing in the SQF code, it is a mandatory clause, so it's not something you can just skip and say doesn't pertain to me because I don't want it to or because of these reasons. Everybody must have an internal audit system. And during the internal audit, you look at your entire management system, be it food safety or quality or both. So the entire system, front to back. It helps you understand what some of those gaps are in your system. That way you can fix those gaps and make it better. Continuous improvement we'll talk about later. Not only that, but it improves not only your knowledge in your systems and what you have going on, but also the people involved in your facility. It helps them improve their knowledge in your systems. And by improving their knowledge, maybe there's things that we're not thinking about that we could put back in to that continually improving our systems. It helps prevent food safety failures because during this process, you may identify gaps that could lead to a food safety failure. And luckily, we didn't get caught, and we filled that hole. We put the Band-Aid over it. We spackle it, whatever we're going to do, so that food safety failure doesn't happen. And it helped build confidence with your stakeholders. Your stakeholders could be SQF, could be your customers, could be your third-party auditor, could be your plant manager, your owner, could be anybody in your system that you deal with. It helps build confidence with those stakeholders because of your robust internal audit system you have in place. They know that you have a strong system because of what you're doing, not only in your third party audit, but your internal audit as well. So it helps build confidence with those folks that you know what you're doing. They feel comfortable with what you're doing, and they're not afraid of food that's going to their customers or going out the door.
So just to add to that,
Hmm.
as the SQF practitioner, it should also add confidence to you that you've looked
Yeah.
at your system and you know that it's a good system, that you've evaluated it, and maybe not you personally weren't the auditor, but that you can go back and review those records and say, I have confidence in our system that we're doing the right things and we don't have those gaps.
Yeah, and it helps you defend it too. If during that third party audit that we all love, me as an auditor, we all love third party auditors coming in. It helps you be able to defend that because you know your system front to back and inside and out after doing this effectively. So it helps with that as well. All right. So how do we prepare for an internal audit? I mean, there's lots of things to do to prepare for this or anything else, but first off, is document a procedure. So you have a procedure for internal auditing, what we're doing, how we're doing it, who's going to do it, what we're doing, what we're going to do it with, things like that. So develop an effective SOP, an effective procedure around your internal audit process. Define the scope of your internal audit, what it's going to include. We're going to look at, all the procedures. We're going to look at your facility and with that, determine a schedule. And when I say a schedule, you can if you want. So throughout the year, we're going to look at these sections of SQF code. We're going to look at, on January, we're going to do this, February, we're going to do that. You can do that. You don't have to. It's just an idea. You can do it all at once. So whatever you determine when you're going to do that internal audit or that facility inspection, your internal audit system, whatever you say, we're going to do it here, we're going to do it this often, we're going to do it this way, or I'm going to do it this way. Make sure that frequency is met and put it in your procedure. And when you do that, make sure it's an annual program. Um, and again, that's per SQF. We want to make sure it's an annual. That way, things change throughout the 12 months ahead of us. We want to make sure we catch those changes. And then lastly, on my bit here is decide on SQF, or not an SQF audit tool, but on an audit tool. That could be the SQF checklist, as I just stated. I got ahead of myself. And that is free to download from the SQF website. It's a very useful tool. It's the same thing the auditors use, and it helps you have the test in front of you that you're going to be given later on. But not like you're preparing for the audit, you're preparing yourself for being audit ready, for continuously improving, for always wanting to do something better. A lot of sites have an internal tool they've developed, and a lot of sites have developed that internal tool by using a software system. There's lots of different software systems out there. You can put it on a tablet, you can put it on a laptop, you can put it on your phone, and as you do your internal audit, you have it there in front of you. I mean, same with the SQF checklist. Any of these things could be in a software system. So decide on what you want to do, whatever works best for you and your facility. Just do that. Elizabeth, as far as a question for you, in SQF size on an annual basis, what does that mean?
So annual is based upon a 12-month period. It's not necessarily the calendar year. So it's not like, oh, I started it in January of 2024, and as long as I complete it by December of 2025, we're okay. That does not meet the intent of the code. Now, with that saying, if you complete it in July of 2024, the expectation is by July of 2025, it would be completed. Now, if you tell me you completed it July 31st of 2024 and you don't get it till August 5th of 2025, that still meets the intent of the code. But we're looking within that 12-month period, but not within just a calendar year. So just keep that in mind as you are planning it. Brian touched based on that schedule. So I've been at plants where we did it all at once. And all at once, it may have been over a 3-day period that we sat down.
Yeah.
And we evaluated our entire system. And it was that week. We did it all within 1 week. I've been at another facility where we did it throughout the year, but I was assigned different topics on a monthly basis. Both of them worked. So it's a matter of what works for your site, what works for your personnel. Um, just because it worked 5 years ago, reevaluate it. Maybe that what you are doing isn't what works best for you anymore. So look at what your schedule is, your frequency, and evaluate it and what would work best for you.
Yeah, good point. Thanks for clarifying that. All right, so this is again one of those things that it's different for your facility. You may have a facility with 5 people, you may have a facility with 5,000 people. So the way you approach this is different. And what I mean by that is an audit team. Some places may be able to have an audit team, some places may not be able to have an audit team. So it's depending on your size, what you have going on, how robust you can make this. And as I said there, if you do have an audit team, make sure it's cross-functional. What that means is you have people from maintenance, you have people from sanitation, you have people from operations, whoever it may be. That way they go in, they look at these things. They don't look at them on an everyday basis, so they can look at it with that new set of eyes. So cross-functional team, or another good option is a third party or someone outside of your company coming in and delivering that internal audit. There's lots of folks out there that do just that, deliver that internal audit against the SQF code or whatever you want them to have an internal audit against. They can do it on whatever frequency, whatever schedule you want. So if resource is a problem for you, consider having a third party do that for you. And then whenever you do decide on a team, or maybe it's one person, 2 people, whoever it may be, assemble that team as a practitioner, as the QA manager, get those folks together and make sure that the schedule is understood. If that schedule is we're going to do everything next week or we're going to do everything over the next 12 months, make sure that's understood, the scope's understood, all those things are understood by everybody involved. And then make sure whoever is doing the audits, if that's, like I said, the maintenance manager or a production line lead, whoever that may be, make sure that person is trained, and not only just trained over your procedure, over internal auditing, but it's documented. If it's not documented, it didn't happen kind of thing. So make sure that training is documented. And we'll go into a little bit more later on about documentation of your internal audit. But make sure that training has been documented. And when you do assign auditors or auditor to a certain task, a certain area, a certain procedure to look at, whatever that is within the internal audit process, make sure that person or those individuals are independent of the work being done. So if for example, I wrote the metal detector procedure, I don't want to audit my own work because I think it's perfect. I did it. I'm the best metal detector writer out there. So I wrote that procedure. It's all good. So have somebody else look at that procedure. That way, for sure that everything is considered, during within that procedure. Um, and again, the auditor will complete the audit tool or the audit using a tool. And the reason we say use a tool, it's for many reasons. We could think in our head, I know it all. But at the end of the day, you have this checklist or this tool. We won't say checklist, but this tool of all these items we wish to cover. And by using the SQF checklist as an example, it lists all those things out. You can go down this document and for each question, put how we comply, how we don't comply. So conformance and non-conformance on that checklist or that tool. And that way, for sure you've covered everything that you need to cover. And again, per SQF, they require you look at the entire SQF system on an annual basis. And this helps ensure that you're able to do that and you don't miss some things. And then again, if possible, if you do use an audit team, maybe a good idea to rotate those folks. So if you do it one year, these people did this section, maybe put them on a different section next year so they're looking at something completely different. And again, that's just an idea. You don't have to do anything I say, but just an idea, kind of a best practice if you are able to have a team. Elizabeth, as far as audit teams and people go, what are your thoughts on that aspect?
Um, Great question. I was like, so we talk about that you have to be independent from that
Mhm.
area. We say where practical. So for 99.9% of our sites, it's practical. We say if you have more than 3 people at your site, it's
Yeah.
practical. And we say that because if you only have two, it's your practitioner and your backup. So you go, okay, how do we be completely independent? Because there's a lot of stuff that is the practitioner's responsibility. So the practitioner, in a lot of cases, can't be the internal auditor. One of my previous jobs that we shared that responsibility. So there were multiple practitioners. So if I wasn't in charge of that program, then I could be the internal auditor. So we kind of got around that. And that's a way for someone to do that. But there has to be some way that you're independent. Um, you talked about being a third party or an outside source.
Mhm.
It could be a sister facility, or maybe it's a competitor, that's down the road, and they say, hey, if you come and do my internal audit, I'll come do your internal audit. I've heard of sites doing that. Want to have an NDA probably signed, but it's completely doable. You need to figure out what works best for you within those code requirements. So how can you have that independent source? And a team is wonderful. But you're going, yeah, if you're a site of 5 people, a team might not be practical. And it might be the easiest to say, I'm going to hire a consultant, and they're going to do our internal audit, and that would be great. I did see a question came in the chat. Is a customer audit count as an internal audit? And it doesn't. That does not count. They would have to use the tool for SQF. And more likely than not, that customer is going to have their own set of guidelines. So an internal audit to meet SQF requirements needs to cover the SQF code and all of those requirements, not the customer specific requirements.
Yeah, that's a good point because a customer is focused on a certain, maybe they're concerned about allergens, maybe they're concerned about your EMPs. So they're concerned about certain things. They're not going to be concerned about every little thing that's in the SQF code. So that's a good point, Elizabeth. All right, very good. So conducting an internal audit. I know it's a lot of discussion so far about it. We've already talked about the audit tools, but we just kind of talked about it again, just kind of refresh your memory. And again, as Elizabeth said, whatever tool you use, make sure it's designed from the SQF requirements. So it needs to meet the requirements. Again, per SQF, you must audit the full SQF system annually. So make sure you are auditing the full SQF system annually with whatever tool you use. You don't have to use a checklist, but it's an easy way to do it. And as I mentioned earlier, make sure you're looking at your entire system, front to back, side to side, in between, everything, every part of your management system, to ensure you're not only covering everything, but you identify all the gaps that may or may not be there. And if there's no gaps, that's great. Um, on that point, one thing I will say is, I'm not saying nobody's perfect, but if you go through this internal audit and you decide there's no gaps, we don't have any non-conformances, nothing to fix, great job, everybody. Maybe consider evaluating your internal audit procedure. And again, I'm not saying nobody's perfect, but just you want to be as hard as you can during this internal audit, just to catch everything that may or may not slip past you. So just to consider that as you kind of go through this process. And that facility inspection part, you want to look at everything inside, outside, look in all the locked doors. As an auditor, if I come up in the facility and I see a locked door, I'll ask the site to open it. If they don't have a key, I'll say, okay, we'll hang out here while you get a key, because I want to make sure in those rooms they're not, hiding a pile of cats or something. They release their cats at night and they lock them in there in the daytime. Whatever it may be. I'm going to look in all those rooms as well. So make sure when you're doing your inspections of your facilities, you look in all the rooms and outside the rooms, check all the doors, check if you have locked gates that's supposed to be locked, make sure those gates are locked. Do everything. And as I said there, your third party auditor, whenever you have a third party auditor comes in, think about what they're doing. They're checking those doors. They're looking in all the rooms. They should be doing all these things. So just make sure you do the same thing because you want to make sure it's as thorough as possible. Um, and again, make sure you're looking at all the programs that support your management system. And then document conformance and non-conformance and compliance. So in your audit tool, say what's good, say what's bad. Not bad necessarily, where there's a gap, opportunity for improvement, if you will. And this is two things that helps you. So when you identify compliance, how you meet that question, when that third party auditor shows up, you have this internal audit in front of you, this checklist. And when they go to question 254 as an example, they say, well, how do you meet this? Well, show me this. You have comments now in your tool that says, we have this in place and we do this and whatever it may be, where you have a quick reference to say how we're compliant with that question. And that might help the third party audit process go smoother. I've been in audits where I'm asking about a question because I don't follow the checklist. I kind of skip around. And the client will say, "What question are you on?" And they flip their page on their internal audit and they say, "Okay, well, here it is." And they'll give me a procedure, they give me records, whatever it may be. So that's also a good reason to document the conformance of how we meet the requirements of that question. Um, all right, very good.
That's a great point there, Brian.
Yeah.
When an auditor comes, it never fails. You get flustered. Your brain is
Mm,
processing faster than normally, and you're scrolling, you're trying to find something. You're like, I have this procedure and I don't know where it is. But that internal audit, it helps your brain slow down a little bit. So you can look at it and
mhm,
go,
yeah.
oh, that's right. That's my procedure number. That's where I found it. So if you have that evidence of conformance, it really does it does help during an audit when their auditor is right in your face.
Yeah, and two, it helps too if you have new people you're training, or there's lots of useful tips for that audit tool. Some tips and tricks. If you want, Elizabeth, I'll let you take this one over.
Absolutely. So we train our auditors on the road to Rio. We talk about records, interviews, and observations. It's one of those things that when you go out to collect your objective evidence, that's how you should be doing it. So look at those records. Look at all your documentation, your policies, your procedures, all those things that are maybe paper or electronic, either way, and interview people. We often say that people stop at that records and they don't continue to go further. So go and talk to people on the floor. If you're doing the internal auditing for the food safety plan and you're at the part about the CCPs, go talk to someone who actually checks the CCPs. Talk to them to ask them how they do it. Do they follow the procedure? Um, See what their insight is. Don't forget that so critical just to go and talk to someone about what they do. And it also makes them more comfortable. So when an auditor would come, they would kind of anticipate what is going on. It doesn't make them overly nervous then when an auditor shows up. They go, oh, okay, I understand. They're here to ask me about my job because that's what the auditor really is interviewing about. And make those observations. Go out onto the floor and look. We talk about that the internal audit isn't just about GMP inspections, but it is about making observations. So what is going on? So watch someone do a CCP check. So are they actually doing what they said they were doing? Are they following that procedure? What does it look like? I had an SQF auditor at my one site, and he would just stand there on the floor, just stand there. It was probably a good 10, 15 minutes. He didn't say anything. He didn't move. And I'm like, okay, you have me pondered now. What
Mhm.
are you doing? Um, and he was like, no, he's like, I just have to watch people. I want to see what they're doing and where they're going. So make those observations. They are so important. They are what people do versus what they say they do sometimes don't align. So everyone's supposed to wash their hands when they come onto the production floor. Do they? If you stand there and watch and they see you, maybe. What if you stand somewhere when they can't see you? Are they still doing it? Do you have a camera that you can look at? So there's different ways to do it, but make sure that you don't just look at documentation and then you do go talk to people and make certain observations. We also talk about audit trails. So, okay, you talk to that person who does the CCP check. Do they have the right training on file to do that CCP check? That is a requirement for training. So follow that audit trail and what that means. If you see something that doesn't look quite right, pull on that thread, dig a little bit deeper. At the end of the day, it's going to help your site, whether you can say, nope, I found out that we are meeting the code, we are meeting the intent behind all of our policies and procedures, or maybe there's a gap and we need to find that gap before our third party auditor does. At the end of the day, this is all about making your site better. So it's not about your SQF score. But I will tell you that on average, sites that get a minor nonconformance to internal auditing score about 5 points less on their overall score. And sites that get a major get over 20 points less on their overall score. So It's crazy. So go out and do your internal audit and be effective about it. Make sure that you're doing it to improve your site because that's in the end of the day, the intent behind the code and why you should do it.
Yeah, it's a good point. And just quick on that, the audit trails comment you mentioned. One good thing to do is do a trace exercise, and it's part of your requirement anyway. But during that trace exercise, that's a really easy place to do an audit trail because you pull up records during that trace exercise on receiving, as an example. You see Mr. Smith received this stuff on whatever, so you go back and look at his training to make sure he has been trained on that process. You can look at your supplier approval program because, oh, we got grapes in, is let's look at the supplier approval program. Now are we meeting the requirements for that grape supplier? So there's lots of different paths you can take when you do a simple trace exercise. Just by looking at the receiving records, for example, you can look at a finished product, you can look at specifications, lots of things. So just think about that as you're going through this process, and you can knock a lot off your checklist, your buckets, just by doing a simple, following audit trails, as Elizabeth mentioned. So yeah, great idea. Very good. So after the audit, what do we do now? We just put it in the closet and wait till next year and go over it? No. So what we need to do is go over those findings. If we have an audit team or if it's just one person, two people, whatever it may be, gather all those people together, all those findings together, go over, the conforming, non-conforming, and then figure out a path forward. And that path forward is anything that you identify as non-conforming. Make sure you define a proper root cause, not just the water hose on the floor because the guy didn't put it back up. Ask the why, to develop that proper root cause until you get down to the main root cause of it. I mean, it says right there, just think about a tree. The root's the very thing on the bottom. So we want to get down to the root cause of the situation, why it happened, why it was wrong, why didn't it meet the intent of the code, things like that. Once you develop that root cause, define that root cause, then you can easily develop that corrective action. So here's what we did to fix it. Here's what we put into place to make sure it doesn't happen again. Things like that. Develop that corrective action. And then once you have the root cause, you have your corrective action developed, implement that corrective action, put it in play, um, make it live, make it happen, release it to the wild to fix those problems and make sure they don't happen again. And then if that's a month later, 2 months later, whatever you define in your procedure, your process, follow up on those non-conformances to make sure that your corrective action was effective and that it is working. And that could be, someone else on the floor, could be, just make sure you follow up on those corrective actions to make sure they are effective. Or at that point, you may have implemented a corrective action that it doesn't work and it doesn't fix anything and it's just broken again. So make sure it's effective. Document everything. So document everything in your audit tool, document your root cause, document your corrective action, document your follow-up. So make sure everything is documented. And then at the end of the day, if just like with your recall, you do a recall challenge once a year. If during that mock recall, that exercise, you find an issue, you adjust your recall procedure. Same with your internal audit. If during this internal audit process you decide, as we talk about the schedule, doing it over one day is just way too much. We need to split it up throughout the year. Then you've identified that issue, you fix it, and then that hopefully it works better for you in the future. So adjust your procedure as needed to make it work better for you and your facility. Elizabeth, anything you think you can add here?
I just want to re-emphasize the way you said it was wonderful. So root cause comes before the corrective action. So I've seen so many sites try and implement their corrective action before they've identified their root cause.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. There is a particular order that has to occur. So find that root cause, do that first, and then you can implement your corrective actions, your preventative actions. But make sure you've identified that root cause, and keep digging. People will use that 5 why, which is a great method, and they'll get to that first why and they stop. So just make sure you keep asking that question of why. Why is that occurring? Why did it happen? To figure out if you can dig deeper to figure out what that true root cause is, because then you'll find that your corrective actions aren't effective if you haven't found that true root cause.
Yeah, and one of the biggest root causes I see as a reviewer is training. Training was not correct, or it was not effective. But why? So again, don't just stop there. Don't just say it's an oversight. Don't say it's a training issue. Make sure you find out what the real root cause was. And maybe it is those things.
We see the
Um,
same thing with training. Sorry there, Brian.
yeah, no, go ahead.
That people always want to say that training is the issue. And I'm not saying that training isn't ever the issue, but if training is the issue, just
Mm,
retraining someone isn't going to fix it.
yeah,
Why wasn't your training effective? Was it in a language that they didn't understand? And you're going, oh, I didn't realize they didn't speak English or Spanish, and you need to adjust your languages. Um, or maybe it was the way that it was presented. It was in a group setting and you decide you needed to do a one-on-one. But if your training isn't effective, you need to look at your training program and not just say, oh, we retrained and all is well. But what did you do differently the second time to make it more effective?
yeah, good point. All right, so just a few tidbits here. So just to kind of wrap it all together, put a bow on at the end, and so you get your gold star as I put there. So an effective internal audit system is essential for an effective management system, if that makes any sense. So you have your internal audit, it looks at your entire management system, and that way it helps ensure that it's effective to, do what you need to do to make sure at the end of the day, we're sending out food that's not going to hurt people. So that's our main goal in life as food safety professionals. You want to conduct the audit using a tool. And again, the tool, make sure it covers the entire management system, the entire SQF system, and covers your entire system. Otherwise, you're going to have gaps that you're not going to know about. You're going to forget about looking at the metal detector that I talked about, that I'm a professional at metal detector procedures. But make sure you look at everything. And again, discuss the findings with the audit team, if you have a team, with whoever the auditor was, with your management team. You wanted to, of course, discuss that in your management meetings per the SQF code. Make sure everybody understands the internal audit, what the scope of it was, what the outcome of it was, what we're doing to fix it, things like that. Develop and implement corrective actions, root causes we talked about. Make sure that that's effective. Follow up, because without follow up, we may have put something in place that it's just broken again, and we don't know it until the next year. And then do it all over again. Just a big revolving wheel that, in order to be continuously improve and continuously grow and improve, we have to just keep that wheel turning. That gear's got to turn. We got to do it all over again, and maybe even do it better next time. And the last thing here is an effective internal audit system can be your best friend, and that can mean lots of things, because you do find those gaps, you do improve. It helps build confidence in your customers. Lots of good things come out of an effective internal audit system.
Like I mean, we
Elizabeth,
said
anything you'd
earlier.
like to add there?
Yeah, so we said earlier about you can use that as a resource. So
Mm,
as you've completed your internal audit or your team has completed it, it is a resource for you. So don't just do it and put it in your pocket and forget about it. That you can use this as a resource not only for as you're doing your internal audit, as your third party auditor is there, but you can use it later. You're going, okay, well, we said we were compliant in that, but I'm noticing something's going on. So reevaluate that system. It's a living document that it continuously, you can update that throughout the year. Yes, you might have a certain schedule, but go back to that. It's a great resource for you, and don't be forgotten about.
yeah, good point. And last thing, just to kind of mention it, because I love continuously improving. I love growing myself, improving myself, is continuous improvement. You should always, and this is with your management system, I won't be a life coach, but maybe in life too, but you should always be looking to improve your systems. Always look for ways that they can be better. And if you find out that we don't have any gaps, what can we do to just make them more robust? What can we do to move it forward just one more step ahead of our competition, just or even for ourselves? There's always something that can be done better. You should, again, want to find the gaps. You don't, I mean, we all have audits, the third party auditor coming in, SQF auditor or whatever auditor coming in, a lot of customer audits still. Would you rather them find the gaps or you? So that's what I said earlier is, again, we're not doing this for the auditor. We're not just doing this for SQF. We're doing it for you. You want to do it for yourself to improve, but be as tough as you can during this third part or this internal audit. Sorry. If you have an audit team, make sure they understand that. Just pick at every little thing so we can fill those gaps. We can improve, even if it's not a nonconformance in the eyes of the SQF code, if it meets the intent of the code, but we can do things better. Have them point that out, because you always want to just improve your systems. And like I said, always be audit ready because, unannounced audits are a fun thing to have. And then just the quote there by Ben Franklin, without continual growth and progress, such words as improvement, achievement, and success have no meaning. So take that for what it's worth. I don't know, Elizabeth, what do you think about continuous improvement?
I mean, I think it's something that we can apply to all aspects of our life. But you
Yeah.
look at it from a site perspective, you're going, I want to get better. So if someone's coming behind me, so most often I did the supplier approval program. That was the program for whatever reason that was always mine in every plant that I've worked at. But
Mhm.
when someone else did that internal audit on it, I wanted them to do a thorough job because I didn't want them to act like my friend and give me, a soft, cushy answer. I'm like, no, look at it. What could I be doing better?
Yeah.
Because I would rather have one of my coworkers point it out that, hey, there's a deficiency here, than waiting for our SQF audit and then be brought up that, hey, this isn't correct. So continuous improvement, it happens all the time. None of us are perfect. I am far from perfect. So how can I get better? It's not about perfection, but getting better than you were. So as long as you are continuously improving, you're on the right path. And if you've become stagnant, it's almost the same as going backwards. So you want to get better. So make sure you're trying to get better.
Yeah, it's a good point. Don't use the motto, "Oh, we got a 98 last year. We're fine. We'll smooth sail through this year's audit." Yeah, don't use that motto because things change, or things don't change, so yeah, always do that. All right, with that. Let me move on here. So just real quick, and the reason I come to this side is we next is a questions Q&A session. I just wanted to quickly go over some of Eurofins stuff, mainly because everybody knows Eurofins as one of the largest lab suppliers in the world, but not everybody knows we also do SQF audits as an example. As you see there, SQF training, consulting, we do lots of other stuff. And I don't want to spend a lot of time. I just want to kind of mention it. If you do need any assistance with anything or just have any questions, let me know. And with that, I'll pass it over to for questions.
So before I go to questions, I just want to say, Brian, that's a really great point. When I started, I didn't realize that Eurofins did so much more than labs. So I imagine
Mhm.
that there's a lot of people out there that are in the same boat. So it's a really good point.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth.
So we do have a lot of questions that came in. So I
Good.
really appreciate all those questions. So who can be an internal auditor? We do talk about that it has to be trained. It does not have to be a third party training. It does need to be documented in some way. How are you proving that they're trained? What is that training? It could be a third party, but that it's not spelled out by SQFI. So anybody, as long as they're trained, can be an auditor, an internal auditor. You go, maybe it's your maintenance person, maybe it's someone who
Mhm.
typically drives a forklift, and you go, you know what? I need you to come and be our fresh set of eyes and do our internal audit. And that is perfectly fine as long as they are trained in how to do an internal audit. That is acceptable. Any job, any position can do that.
Yeah, good point. And train to you have that internal audit procedure. So make sure they understand that. Make sure the purpose of it, the scope of it, all those things. And yeah, it could be almost anybody that can read your procedures and understand what should be there according to the SQF code. So yeah, good point.
And we do have a question here. I'll throw this to you, Brian. So what type of evidence should be documented?
Everything should be documented, as I said. If it's evidence to prove, like records, for example, you want to document everything that shows you're compliant with or whatever that requirement is. And same with your internal audit. So you have your audit tool. You want to document everything that to prove how you're compliant with that requirement. So if a requirement says, does this have a metal detector? Does the metal detector show, these certain things? You want to document as evidence. We have X procedure, procedure number, if you want, procedure name, however you want to say it. And as an auditor, what we also do is we put procedure name, we'll put version number to reference that, but also how the procedure met the requirements. So it's not a bad idea. I mean, you can over document stuff, but put enough evidence down to clearly show how you meet the intent of the code. I like using, and this goes kind of off topic here, but a reference whenever I do training for corrective actions or even report writing for auditors is think about a painting. And when you look at a painting, is it clear what that painting is representing? If so, that painter, that artist, put enough evidence in there to help us understand what that is. And do the same thing. You want to paint a clear picture as the internal auditor, as the third party, whoever that may be. Whenever the reader looks at that report, they're able to understand exactly what you looked at, exactly how you're compliant.
Absolutely, Brian. We talk about our trainers. I'm sorry, we train our auditors. It's that value added. So where is that
Yeah.
value added information? If you tell me that there's pitting in your floor, uh, that doesn't tell me a whole lot. But if you
Yeah.
tell me that there's pitting and the production floor at the right side underneath the sink, and you're going, okay, you're starting to paint that picture, as you said, so you can get that full understanding. So as your internal audit, you should be trying to paint that picture so you guys can go back and I don't want to say recreate, but that you can understand what it was like at that specific time of what you saw, what records you looked at, what interviews you made. They're so important to support that either compliance or nonconformance.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah.
All right, another question for you, Brian. So what about non-food product processing areas? So talking about when we were doing the inspection out on the floor,
Yeah.
will an auditor be opening up different areas, maybe like an attic, something like that?
Yeah, so they will look at areas that could impact the food safety of the areas, food processing, for example. So everything is in scope that's in the building. I've had auditors that go to the roof. I've had auditors go in the attics. I've had auditors that climb all the catwalks and go all the way to the top of the ceiling, kind of thing. So everything is in scope within that building, unless it has an exclusion and it's excluded from the audit and you have risk assessment, that stuff like that. But as an example, like I said, I open every door. If there's not a key, I ask them to get a key and I look in every room because there might be a mouse in there and that mouse could go under the door. It could go into the processing area and it could do his business and do whatever it wants and hang out and have a good time in the processing area. So yeah, if you can access it, it should be included in the scope of your audit. Yes.
And so as you brought up different exclusions or exemptions,
Yeah.
and even if you do have that for a particular area, the auditor should still inspect that.
Yeah,
They should
they
still
should.
look at that area and go, are there any food safety concerns that could spill over? So just take that in consideration when you are doing your own internal audit.
Yeah, that's a good point. I know whenever I look at exemptions, like a site wants to say this area of the building or this room over here isn't being used and we haven't used it for 10 years, we want to exclude that. And I'll put in my document that it still will be looked at. And if anything in there has potential affecting the in-scope areas, then it could lead to a non-conformance. So I do, yeah, so that's a good point.
Someone asked the question about, do we need to verify the results? So I'm not sure verify is the correct terminology there, but you do need to review the results. So just having your completed internal audit, that's a great first step, a huge first step. But you have to look at what those results are. As part of your annual requirement, you have to look at trends. So are there trends that came out
Yeah.
of that internal audit? So verify, maybe not, but you do have to review them and look at what that means and how it affects your site, and you should want to. It's part of that continuous improvement. So there isn't a set person that would have to look over those to discuss them. But I would expect that management might want to know what's going on. Maybe not every single line. I would imagine most of them don't actually want to know that. But the overall, what happened? What was the scope of it? What were the findings? I would want to know if I was management.
Yeah. Yeah, just be transparent. Yeah, for sure.
Something we did discuss earlier, Brian, someone's asking about what an internal audit team is. So if you have a really small company, what would that look like?
Yeah, let's say if you have a building of 5 people that work there. So you have QA manager, you have a plant manager, you have 3 line workers. If you want to develop a team, I mean, it could be, you have a machine operator do that or a maintenance technician. You could have an audit team with that so they can kind of look at things together or they could divide and conquer. So an audit team, as Elizabeth said, it could be anybody in your facility. If you want to develop a team, it could be 1, 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, it could be 10 people. It could be however many or however little you want. Or if you don't have an audit team, it could be one person as your auditor. So again, you could have as many or as little as you want, as long as they have the training, they understand, the purpose of the internal audit, they understand the scope of the internal audit. As long as the understanding is there, the training is there, it could be almost anybody in your facility. And, it could be an outside consultant, as was mentioned as well.
So we did mention that, and just to make sure people understand that that's not dependent upon size. So whether you're a site that has 5,000 people or a site that there's two, you have that option of hiring an outside consultant.
Yeah.
So that's not like, oh, that's only an option for small sites. It's an option for anybody. So if you find that you're like, no, we want to make sure we get a little bit more value, and you're going, I have a trusted consultant. Maybe you're going to hire an SQF registered consultant. And you go, what does that mean? You can have that consultant go and do your internal audit. And maybe you want to do that to start with. And you go, okay, we're going to use that as our template because we're not sure how to do an internal audit, and you can use that. But you can also use your SQF third-party audit because, and since they're doing an internal audit, it's just from a third-party perspective.
Real quick, Elizabeth, as far as that goes, so we're using a consultant. We bring in a consultant we know we've worked with, but the problem is he or she, they helped us write our programs 3 years ago. Can that person be our internal auditor now?
I would say as long as they're not running your programs,
Hmm.
the fact that they wrote it, I wouldn't be overly concerned because they're not necessarily just looking at the policy, but how you're implementing it. So how is that being applied on the floor? What records are being supported on it? Are you following it?
Yeah.
Do I have a procedure? And yes, they're looking to see that the procedure meets the code, but it's more than that. It's so much more than that. It's that implementation that I think people overlook, and that's where the nonconformances truly are.
Yeah, good point.
I'm scanning down here through the questions. People were asking about training. There's a bunch of those. I think we've covered that. Um, Someone did ask about if they split up their frequency. So we talked about that annual requirement.
Mhm.
So I'll talk with supplier approval. So if you do your internal audit and supplier approval in January, and they're saying they're reevaluating their risk and they're moving everything's around, and now you don't do it to the following December, that would not meet the intent of the code. So yes, if you break it up into a month by month basis, do be cognizant of that. Are you changing when you're doing it? Um, Typically, that's not going to be a huge risk for people, but do take that into consideration. That would technically be a non-conformance there.
Yeah, very good point. And that's one of those things too. Once you set that schedule, so every month we do these things, or every quarter we do these things, you're kind of tied to that schedule at that point. Because if we do it, as Elizabeth said, in January this year, now have 12 months to do it again. We can't wait 12 or 14, 15, 16, 17 months. We now have that, we started the clock, if you will. So make sure, yeah, you're aware of that.
A lot of comments in here, not questions. So can we get the certificate for that training? I don't know what that means. Um, so there's a lot of comments here, so you can get your HACCP training through Zosi. There's a lot of different third-party online things that you can get HACCP training, but HACCP training is different than internal auditing.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind.
And as Elizabeth goes through that, anything past today you think about, you want to reach out with a question you may have, here's some contact. We've got ours on there. We've got SQFs on there. Everybody knows SQFs, but I put mine on the earlier slides. But yeah, if you have any questions at any point, reach out to us, and we're happy to help out. SQF, of course, is always happy to help out. So let one of us know.
So there seems to be a bunch of questions about splitting up your internal audit. Just to reiterate, it does not have to be all at once,
Yeah.
but document it. So if you do it over a 12-month period, completely acceptable. I was at a site and we did that, but just make sure you're documenting as you go. What are you reviewing? What are your records, interviews, and observations that you've made during each of those time frames?
Yeah, and as an auditor, I've audited both ways as well. Some folks will have every month we do this, once a quarter we do this, or it's just once a year. we do the full internal audit. We sit down for a day, we sit down for a week, whatever it may be. So yeah, whatever works best for you and your team, your resource is how you want to move forward with that.
So someone asked about timing of nonconformances. What is
Hmm.
that length of time that you can complete your corrective actions for your identified nonconformances?
Yeah, with SQF, it's 30 days. You set that. What works for you? What is a reasonable time frame? Of course, don't say we have 6 months to close non-conformances, because one thing also, your third party auditor will come in there and look at your internal audit, like, great, you did one, you developed corrective actions, but why did it take you 9 months to close this one out? So they will look at that as well. And you may or may not have, in our internal audit procedure, we have everything closed within 30 days or 45 days or 60, whatever that may be. But I would recommend doing that and make sure you hold yourself to it, because if you just say we're going to close them out when we get to them, then that could cause further problems. Because if it was something simple like, oh, we had a chipping paint here on this motor, something as easy as that, but we didn't fix it for 11 months. So that raises questions too. So make sure you do in a reasonable time frame, whatever that reasonable time is. I would say within 60 days, 90 days, again, whatever you set, whatever is acceptable for your process, and stick to that.
So like at SQFI, we talk about that risk. So where
Yeah.
is that risk level? And maybe it is a large expenditure and you're going, well, we're not going to have the funds for it, or we have to put in a work order and things have to get ordered. It's going to take a while. Okay, but what is that risk?
Yeah.
Can you mitigate that risk in the meantime? What temporary fix can you put into place? What monitoring do you need to do to mitigate the risk that you found? So it's not just a matter of, oh, I won't look at it for the next 6 months, and as long as it's completed then, I'm good. And I've seen sites that do that. That's
Hmm.
not okay. What is going on? And if it's a policy that needs updated, I would expect that that gets a quick turnaround. It should be an easier type of fix. There is no long-term. At SQFI, we say a minimum of 30 days, and you go, there is no extension for updating a policy. It doesn't create a large expenditure. You're not ordering any kind of parts that are on back order. So look at what that is. And if you're just saying, oh, we've identified the nonconformance and you're walking away from it, reevaluate your procedure after you've done your internal audit. How do you evaluate all of your nonconformances that you find? Because maybe you need to look at that procedure and reevaluate your site to make sure that you are mitigating the risks, so there aren't food safety issues.
Yeah, it's a great point.
We talk about splitting up. So splitting up the audit. Is there a best way? So Brian, we talk about a team. Um,
Hmm.
do you have any insight on that?
Well, I don't think there's a best way to do anything in what we're doing here. It's going back to what works best for you. And so if you have an audit team and you split up the roles, if you, let's say next week we're going to take this SQF checklist, we're going to complete this SQF internal audit. You take the checklist, and it may be best just to say the first 10 questions you get, the next 10 questions you get. Or you could also take an approach about it like temperature control as an example. It's covered in these sections. So you take everything temperature control related, you take everything foreign material related, you take everything training related, because training's covered in different areas as well. So that could be another approach. You look at the checklist and determine if we want to bundle all the like things together, and that team looks at that, or if we want to bundle like a certain number of questions together, and they do that. You know, whatever is effective, and to make sure everything gets done properly, I think I don't know if there's a right answer for that.
I would say there isn't, as long as they're trained. And it doesn't mean that
Yeah,
they have to be trained in the maintenance area, they have to be trained in pest control. They have to
yeah,
be trained in internal auditing. So what does that mean? It's a lot of people are asking, well, how frequently do I have to do it? Is there an expiration date? Well, if it's an external document, if you've gone and got some third-party training in internal auditing, look on their certificate. Is there an expiration date? Because first, the auditor's going to see that and go, well, technically this expired, so I won't give you a yes or no on that.
and I would recommend, just as part of your training program, you have an annual training program. Maybe just add that to your audit team, just annual retraining. If that way, if anything has changed in your procedure or in your process, it can't hurt, for sure.
Yeah, so that's not an SQF requirement, but
Yeah.
it definitely would be a best practice,
Yeah,
especially if
correct.
you're looking at someone, it's like, no, we just do it once a year. And maybe you have that audit team and one person goes out and does maintenance and they always do it in August. Well, okay, if I do it August this year, am I going to remember August next year what I'm doing? Probably not. So um, take that into consideration. Make sure the person who's going out onto the floor, who's looking at those different things, who is the internal auditor, is comfortable. So maybe that annual refresher would be very beneficial. It doesn't have to be a lengthy training. Don't be like, oh, it has to be a 3-hour training. That's crazy. But yeah, having that refresher training on an annual basis might be a good best practice. Right. Well, I feel like that's the end of all the questions. There was a lot of duplicates, a lot of people asking about frequency. Um, oh, we just had another one come in. Will SQFI have an edition 10 checklist? I can answer yes, we will. Soon? No. So you will not get the checklist before the code is released. So we are still have it kind of vague about when the edition 10 is going to be released because we're waiting on some external sources. Um, Cross our fingers, we should be done writing the code hopefully by the end of this week. But then it goes into a waiting period. So we're on hold. We'll let everybody know when it does get released and what that's going to mean. And there will be a checklist available when that occurs. So yes, keep using edition 9 until you hear more about edition 10, but it is coming. Promise it is coming. Good or bad, I'm not sure, but it is coming.
I'm
Uh,
surprised it took this long for that question to come out, Elizabeth.
Well, there was another one, and I
Okay.
kind of pushed that because I didn't want to interrupt the discussion on internal auditing. But yes, edition 10 is coming. Um, but I think we've gotten through all the questions. That was great timing. So Brian, I don't know if there's any other closing remarks that you want to say to the group.
Yeah, thank you again all for joining. I hope you've picked up some of this and you found it useful. If not, at least you got to hear Elizabeth and I speak for an hour. But other than that, I appreciate everybody's time. I know you everybody has a lot going on. You can choose to do whatever you want during your lunch hour or during your middle of your day, and I appreciate you spending it with us.
Yeah, reiterate that from Brian. Thank you everyone for joining us. I had a lot of fun, Brian. So hopefully we can do this again sometime. Maybe we'll
Yeah, for
talk about a
sure.
different topic. Um, but yeah, make sure when you're doing your internal auditing, you're writing down your compliance, how you're conforming, as well as your non-conformances, because so important. Don't forget that. And make sure you can use that as a resource for you later down the road. And don't just forget once it's done. So thank you, everyone. Much appreciated.
All right. Have a good day, everybody.